I'm Julia from Julia Teaching Resources, and in this video I'm going to show you how to actually do a instrument classification on a piece of music and then turn that information into an extended piece of writing, which is something I do with all my kids on a regular basis, whether it be in year 7 or 9, 10, 11, 12, because my current school, we don't teach music in year 8, they do visual arts. So, but if you are teaching obviously in those year groups, you would do that as well. But as I said, I'm talking about turning information from a listening excerpt into an extended writing piece, because it is such an important skill for our kids to have, to be able to turn something into an extended writing piece. So excuse me for a moment, I dropped something. Okay, so let's share screen. And where are you? There we go. And I'll do a live demonstration on how to do this as well. Why aren't you sharing screen? There it is. All right, here we go. So you should be able to see that. I will go to slideshow. And as I said, we're talking about how to write about instrument classification. Right, so welcome again. As I said, I've already welcome, but just in case, I'll talk about briefly the 8 elements of music. Now, if I say by mistake concepts of music, that's because that's what I teach. Same thing, essentially. I'll give a brief explanation about what those are. I'll also talk to you about what timbre is or tone color is, because that's what essentially what we're talking about. Instrument classification comes underneath that banner. I'll talk about the 2 ways to classify instruments, and then I'll go through the steps in an actual lesson that I take when I'm doing this, and then I'll actually write for you or type for you how I term the information that we get from the kids or from the music we're doing, and actually put that into an extended piece of writing. So there's a lot tonight, so that's why I thought I'd get started early. So the 8 elements of music are, in alphabetical order, if you call form and not structure, but in this way. Okay, so we've got dynamics, means how loud or soft. Form is, or structure is, the order and arrangement of the parts. Harmony refers to the pitched accompaniment to a melody, okay, the way it's performed. Melody is the main part of a piece of music for most Western European tradition. It's the important part. It's the important part that people, it's the bit you remember. Okay, so a melody is a series of pitches that forms a tune. Rhythm is all the rhythmic underlying timing, duration, all those things like time signatures and tempos and all that sort of stuff, all comes under rhythm. Texture is the number of layers of sound in a piece of music and then how they relate to each other. And timbre refers to the sound, the unique sound quality of an instrument, and that encompasses the method of sound production and the type of instrument it actually is. And then also tonality, and that is very closely linked to harmony, but it's the overall sound of the actual music. So let's look at timbre. So timbre is the unique sound quality of an instrument. So it essentially means, what does that instrument sound like? So an instrument, I like to use the example, I use it all the time, an electric guitar, an acoustic guitar, and a steel string guitar are all guitars, but they all have unique sound because of the type of string, and obviously if there's any sort of sound effect that's added to it in terms of an electric guitar. So even though they're all guitars, they sound a bit different. Performing media refers to the instruments used in a piece of music. So the performing media in every piece of music might be slightly different because it depends on what instruments are being performed. So let's look at the timbre mind maps. Now, I should say tone color comes under all those things as well if you talk about the concepts of music, which is, I said, what I do, and tone color is that. So these particular mind maps here are what I've got in here. I've got in a small form. This is the way I give it to my kids, actually, is this one. So I print it 4 to a page. Now, these ones are available in Teachers Pay Teachers. Over on Teachers Pay Teachers, and you get lots of different sets in the actual thingy, but there you can see it's quite small and it's laminated, so it's a bit hard to see, but that's what you've got on the screen there. But in this particular Elements of Music mind maps, these ones, there's a whole stack of different sets in there over on my in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. But you can also get a free set, which I'll talk about later, and it's just a black and white copy, and it's just got all the boxes and you have to fill it in. But if you get the free copy, you simply just pause this video and you can fill in all the information. Okay, so timbre, I like to think of when you're talking about timbre, is you got to think about what you need to talk about, and I use I.S. Doctor. Now, funny thing was, I was in class today, and I've just put some posters up that I've been meaning to do for ages, and I said I always use I.S. Doctor: identify, classify, explain, describe, range, roll, register. I.S. Doctor. And one of my students said to me, "What's ICADA?" And I went, "What are you reading?" They were referring to I.S. Doctor. I said, "Oh, I call it I.S. Doctor." And they go, "Oh, no, it's ICADA." And I went, "Okay, it's ICADA. Right, no worries." But to do this, simply identify your instruments, classify them, which is what we're going to focus on today, explain the technique used to produce a sound, describe how that sounds, and then if you get time, and you've got want to go a bit further, talk about the range, roll, and register. The main thing is to talk about the role in the performance, in the piece of music that you're listening to, but range and register also really helps if you can add that information in. But that's what I like to use for the element of music, timbre, or the concept of music, tone color. So 2 ways to classify. So again, in these little things there, don't forget, these are only little, they're actually, the document is an A4 size, which is your normal printing size, but I print 4 to a page, so I can make these nice little flip cards for the kids. So there's 2 ways you can actually classify instruments. One is to use the instrument families. Now, this is great for traditional Western European style music. So we're talking our orchestras, our string quartets, military bands, all those sorts of things that have that particular type of instrument. So voices obviously is a category on its own. We've got percussion family, instruments to hit, shake or scrape. String family, instruments with strings that usually are bowed or picked or strummed to make a sound. Brass instruments are instruments originally made of brass and have that cup-shaped mouthpiece. And then woodwind instruments originally made of wood, but also have a reed in the mouthpiece. And that's why a saxophone comes under the woodwind family. Now, that's one way to classify. You don't have to do that because not all instruments fit neatly into those little categories. And that's why I like to use this one. Okay, so this is where you can choose. And so electrophones or electronic sounds are instruments that require electricity or an amplifier to make the sound. So we're talking your electric guitars, electric bass, guitar, your synthesizers, keyboards, all those sorts of instruments. Idiophones are instruments that you hit, shake or scrape. Quarterphones are instruments that have strings, okay, or again, like our string family. But again, if you're talking world instruments, it's much easier to put, say, a Chinese yuken, I hope I'm saying that right, more into a quarterphone than trying to classify it as a string family because it fits more there. Okay, and then we've got an aerophone, which are instruments that require movement of air, which again encompasses both woodwind and brass instruments. And then membranophones are instruments that have a skin or stretched membrane. Now, the important thing is, and I've talked about this before, and I've got a banjo sitting over there, but the banjo, even though most banjos have a membrane stretched across them, you're not hitting the membrane to make the sound. It's still a quarterphone because it has strings. Okay, some tambourines have the membrane in it, so that's why you could classify it as a tambourine as a membranophone if they're hitting that section. If they're only shaking it or hitting the rim, then it's more of an idiophone. Okay, so as you can see, that what you've got there is basically these little things here. Okay, so if you're going to do a listening activity, these are the things I do. And in fact, I was finishing off one of this part of this lesson today with one of my classes, and my other class I'll be actually doing the whole thing tomorrow. We're going from woe to go, but we've got a listening activity that you want to do. So print your mind maps and laminate them. Honestly, I have had my sets for years because they're laminated. And the kids, even though they're used by kids left, right, and centre, they're still fine. Okay, some of them are nearly 10-year-old because they work really well. Then you can create the little flip cards like this one if you want to make them little, or I even still make them full size. I print them black and white like use the black and white and just print onto coloured paper. So that way, when I say the kids, please, it's cheaper this way, you know, go to tonality, it's the light green one, or go to texture, it is the yellow one. So then they know what colour they're looking for, and it makes it easy for it to identify. So again, you can print them big or little. And if you print them even bigger, make posters out of them, which is what I did. Okay. Have sets available for students, and then choose a piece of music. So for me, at the moment, we're doing Australian music, and we're also doing large ensembles. So you'll see a piece of music that I'm using and why I've chose that. So play a piece of music. It just has to fit whatever topic you're doing. Okay. Make it relevant to whatever you're listening to or whatever you're studying in class. Ask your students to identify the instruments they can hear. So that's the first thing I always get them to do, is identify the instruments. Listen, and as you hear it, write it down. Then use a blank instrument classification one. So one of these, but blank with nothing on it. And you get them to actually then put the instruments that they think that they've heard under each category. Once you've done that, maybe get them to put the music back on, get them to compare lists, compare what they've got there, compare that it's actually in the right classification, okay, and listen again. It's good for that good discussion then. And then the extension is to turn it into a writing activity. Now that's just a really simple one. Now you don't have to turn it into a writing activity. It can be a straight listening activity, where you get them to use the mind maps. And look, honestly, as I said, I don't print a blank one anymore. I use this and say, okay, copy the mind map into your book. Okay, leave it blank, leave a space for you to write on. And that's how I do it. I said, I make it once an expensive copy in terms of its color, and it's laminated, and it's got a little ring thingy. They last for years, and they copy it and put it into their book. And it gets them into the habit of actually writing things down quickly and classifying as well. So steps: choose a piece of music, which I just talked about. Listen to the music and record the instruments that you can hear. Look at the instruments and decide how you'll classify them. Now, again, because I'm currently doing this with my year 9s and 10s. So I said, we're doing large ensembles. So I gave them in their Google Classroom a few to choose from, because what I've found is when I'm doing this sort of activity, this is an assessment for my kids, when I'm doing that, they sometimes get lost trying to choose a piece of music. So I took that decision away from them, and I gave them 5 different ones and said, right, you're choosing one of these. Now I've got it as a video for them so they can see the instruments. But one of the examples was a lovely bit of something from the Gondwana Voices Choir, a Waltzing Matilda version. It's a really good arrangement. If you can go and have a listen, it's really good. Okay, it's on YouTube. Go have a look. That's a good one, and they could see the different voices. So that's pretty easy to classify. Then I've got another piece by Kate Miller-Heidke and her song Sarah. And it's because I've chose that deliberately, because it has a full orchestra with it. So if the kids want to, like if they're choosing that piece, then they'd add voices, and then they talk about obviously the instruments in each family. But I've also got a piece from the Australian Army Band, and it's good old My Sharona. And most of the kids have actually chosen that one. And they were talking about it today. I said, well, and they said, well, which one do we use, Miss? I said, well, what instruments have you got? And it's a good, that's why I'm talking about this. At what point you have to sort of say to the kids, well, what way do you think it's going to be best to classify them? Is it going to be more of the families, or it's going to be more the phones? And they go, probably going to fit more in that other one. Right, well, you choose that. Okay, so listen again and check for anything you might have missed and add to your list. Okay, and then use the mind map to classify the instruments, or use a table to complete the classification. Now, we had done, what you're going to see is we had done the mind map, and we'd actually put the instruments around it, and then I put it into a table because I needed to do other things with the with it. So this is only a small section of what we actually did as the whole lesson, but just to give you an idea. And then compare your information with another student. We'll have it as a class discussion, and then write about what instruments you have in your response. So to make for an extended response. So here we go. This is the one we did. This was another Australian military band. I can't remember which one it was. Might be the Navy one, but it was, again, another version of Waltzing Matilda. It was lovely. And the thing we liked about this one was that the trumpets and the trombones and tubas, they swapped the melody. So once it was by the trumpets in one section, and then it was the trombone and tuba in the second section. They really liked it. But you can see here that on my board, and yes, we have learning intentions, success criteria, blah, blah, that we've got to do. And I was running out of space, so I rubbed it out. I'm sorry. I did do them, just not there. But you can see the instruments, we've written them down. So that's the first thing I get them to do. So that's the identify, right? And then once we've got them, and I get them just to write it in a list like that, because then we literally count how many we got. And then went, okay, now however many instruments we've got there, let's make a table. And then we make the table by listing the instruments. Now, the other thing I like to do is when we're doing this is I say to them, okay, let's try and group our instruments together. And they go, why? I said, well, you'll see why we do this. So you can see in this particular one, we've grouped the percussion instruments, then the brass family, then the woodwind family. And it makes it much easier when you go to do the classification, what they're doing. Or another way is if you were talking, like we're obviously focusing on classification today, but if you're focusing on performance technique, okay, what the method used to make a sound, or the role, you might want to actually like group them together so that, you know, again, you've got your rhythmic accompaniment all together, melodic accompaniment all together, melody all together. Depends on how you want to group it. But as I said, for this exercise, what we were doing is I was trying to show the kids how to classify. We talked about what was the best method for this particular piece, and they all agreed that we should use the families because it had the brass family, woodwind and percussion. It was nice and easy to identify, and that's why we did it that way. So you can see all the instruments there. Now, one of the other reasons we chose this piece, or I chose this piece for my class, was because we could see the instruments. So if you've got a class or kids who are just learning to identify instruments and by just through sound, get them to watch first, okay? Maybe listen, turn off the screen, and then once they've come up with a list, flick it on so that they can actually see it, and get them to have a look and then make another list again, like, and go, oh, actually, why did I write that in? That there's not even that instrument there. Oh, I missed that one. Again, it just helps them to see, and also really helps when you can see them actually a live performance when the parts are coming in and out. And it's really good, as I said, because not all my kids are used to performing with other people. They're often my singers and guitarists and whatever else who are performing on their own. So it's just good to broaden their horizon. Okay, so as I said, we decided to use the families. So the image that you saw on the other page, I've just made it, I've just cut it down. So we've got the instrument and we've got the classification, and we obviously decided to use these particular classifications for this particular excerpt that we're listening to. As I said, it was a Waltzing Matilda version done by one of the military bands. I should know that because we did it and we spent a lot of time on it. All right, so my next thing is, if to make it into that extension, all right, into the extended writing piece, is to actually make sure that you get the kids to write. So this is where, whoops, sorry, that this comes into place. And I'm just going to go out of there because you need to be able to see me writing. I can't write in when it's actually on like that. And I want to do a duplicate slide because I'm going to run out of space, I think. All right, so I'm going to talk about using music. So music means, for writing, main idea, understanding of the main idea, information, sample, information sample, information sample, information sample, connect to concept or connect to the element or connect to the question. So our main idea is instrument classification. So that's what we're going to talk. Now, when I'm leading this in class, I'll go, okay, we're going to do instrument classification. What does that mean? I get them to give me the answer and we come up with a way that we can actually put that into a sentence. But obviously I'm not going to do that here because I'm talking to myself. So here we go. So instrument classification in music means to group instruments in an excerpt into the different families or sound production method. Instrument classification, I'm going to add to that. Sorry, that should be method. Instrument classification an important aspect of the element of music. All right, so just going to put that in there because that's essentially what we're doing. We're talking about the big picture is timbre, but we're also talking about small part of that, little part of that, which is instrument classification. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the song. So just bear with me. I'm going to say it's the Australian Naval Band. I'm not sure if it might be just go with me. Okay, in the music waltzing, helps if I do a capital there. Tilda. Whoops, that's not spelt right, is it? Sorry. Performed by the Australian Navy military. Wait, I'm so sorry. Military band. There. Now, if we're looking here in the music, there's three main families that you can hear. So in the music, Waltz and Matilda performed by the Australian Navy Military Band, there are three main families of instruments represented. Because there's no voices in this particular excerpt, there's no string family, it's whatever else. It's a typical military band. Okay, so you could even say that there are three main families of instruments represented that are typical of this type of ensemble or military ensemble, something like that. Okay, but again, I try and get my kids to actually talk to me about what type of ensemble is it, how do we know that? And like I said, we talked about this in class. We were doing military bands, we were doing pipe bands, we were doing choirs, we're doing all large ensembles this term or the end of last term. Okay, so all I've done so far is done the main idea and shown understanding of that main idea. Okay, by talking about instrument classification, I've defined what it is, and then I've introduced that which is showing the understanding. Then I've introduced the name of the piece of music, which again is showing understanding, and the type of ensemble. Okay, so the next thing is simply to actually classify the instruments, and this is where I just get the kids to do this. So the instruments from the percussion family and then I'll just list them: bass drum, snare drum, cymbals, and glockenspiel, because there's this tiny little glockenspiel in there. These instruments are all hit, shaken, or scraped with sound. So what I've done then is I've given a specific some information. The instruments from the percussion family are, and so that's the information. Percussion family, I've said what they actually are, so I've given a sample. I've also then, these instruments are all hit, shaken, or scraped to make a sound, which is again more information about the sample. Because I could have said there were instruments like, you'll see it from kids. They're instruments from the percussion family. Great, but what instruments? And how do we know they're a percussion instrument? Okay, so that's why we're just digging a little bit deeper here. So and again, we're not talking about roles or anything at the moment. We could add to that, but we're here. So the instruments, I might go, there are several instruments from the woodwind family. These include, and then I'm going to list them. We've got flute, clarinet, oboe and saxophone. Yes, there was an oboe in there. We could see it. Okay. Woodwind instruments are defined by the material they were originally made from and by the reed in the mouthpiece. I always do that. Mouthpiece. Okay, which is why saxophone's in there. Okay, we could add more to this, but this is enough for tonight to show you what we've got to do. So again, we've talked about the sample being there are several instruments from the woodwind family. And then the information is these include the flute, clarinet, oboe, and saxophone. And again, I've given more information. I've extended it again. The woodwind instruments are defined by the material they were originally made from and by the reed in the mouthpiece. Okay. I might actually by the wooden material they were originally made from and the reed in the mouthpiece. So we're just sort of adding a bit more there. And obviously our last group is the brass instruments. The last family of instruments in the excerpt from the brass family. These, I should make that a full stop, sorry. These instruments no, I was going to mix it up a bit, I won't. These instruments, I was trying to think of another word besides include, but I couldn't think of it. Include the trumpet, what else have I got? Trombone and tuba. I think actually from memory, the one class, I did this twice, and one class picked up that there was a French horn and the other one didn't. I'm just going to skip that one for the moment, okay? The brass family of instruments grouped by the brass material they are made from and the cup, shaped mouthpiece in each instrument. All right, so again, we have done the main part, which is our, what do you call it? Our sample, and then our in-depth information. So the last thing here is just to talk about why is it important to have instruments classified? Okay, why? So again, this is another conversation you have with your students. So why is it important to classify instruments? And they might come up with all sorts of reasons. But one reason might be it's important to classify instruments because it's easy, because you can hear what they're doing. It gives different, or it's important to have instruments from different classifications in a piece of music because it adds variety, which is probably what I'm going to go with now. Okay, it is important, otherwise it might sound a bit bland. It is important to have instruments from several different families in the music because this adds interest and variety to the timbre produced by each instrument. But again, the kids are going to come up with something different, and that's just me on a tired Tuesday night. Okay, so let me just delete that one. So what I'm going to do is, let me just go here and make that here, go home. That, let's see if I can go bold. I like it when it's bold. All right, so I'm just going to duplicate that, and I'm going to then colorize it because you know I like to do that in terms of our music thing. So the main idea is instrument classification. Okay, instrument classification. That is simply it. That is our main idea. So that's what I always make pink. And then our understanding is this other next part. Okay, so we can also say that this is basically our understanding of the type of ensemble. It's the understanding of the main idea. Okay, but it's all our understanding. So the main idea is instrument classification, the understanding of that, so defining it in music means to group instruments in an next set into different families of sound production method. Instruments, actually, sound production method or materials they're made from, you could add that in. Instrument classification is an important aspect of the element of music timbre. In the music Waltzing Matilda, so we've introduced the song, performed by the Australian Navy military band, there are 3 main families of instruments represented that are typical of this type of ensemble. Probably don't need that comment there. Okay. So the next part, the main part, the main juicy part of the paragraph here is our sample and in-depth information, sample information. So you can repeat that as many times as you want. So here is our sample. The instruments from the percussion family. All right, so that is our sample. We're talking about that there are instruments from the percussion family. We are not talking about their role or anything in this particular thing. And then I've explained, and this is our information, our in-depth information. The bass drum, I've explained what instruments they were and why they were defined as that. But you could have actually said percussion family instruments are defined by blah, blah, blah. The instruments in this excerpt that from the percussion family are the blah, blah, blah. You could do it that way too, okay? So that this just happens to be the way I wrote it tonight. There are several instruments from the woodwind family, okay? So again, that is our main, our sample. And then, whoops, go sample. And then these include that last bit there. These include the instruments and then how they are defined as a woodwind instrument. Again, you could write that differently. Then the last group of family instruments was the brass family. So that is our, no, I don't want to move it. I'll make it color sample, make it red. Okay, and then that last bit, that definition of what it is our last thing there, which is our information about the brass family. Okay, it's important to have these instruments, blah, 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 because that is then our connect to concept or connect to question or connect to element. But basically, we're connecting it back to that main idea, back to that main idea. So if you do T-XXXC or T-XXXL, this is that. This is all it is. I just like to use the music framework because for my kids, when I'm doing a podcast, what I would be doing, and that's what they're doing at the moment, is they would do this part, okay, and they'd say the instruments for the percussion family are blah, 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 and this defines a percussion instrument, and here's where it is in the music. Here is a section where the drum does a solo, for example. Bang, they play that sample. Then here are the instruments for the woodwind family. These are blah, blah, blah. And this is how you would act. And then again, they provide a little sample. This is where you could hear the woodwind section doing X, Y, Z. Okay. And then again from the brass family. So this is how I'm getting my kids to actually do these things. So let's just go from current slide. So you can see here again from the listening, what we did is the listening. We chose a piece of music, we listened, we listed our instruments, we classified them. You can use the mind maps to do that. You can use a table to do that. And then from there, from those 2 little columns, we've been able to turn that into an extended piece of writing, which is my goal all the time with my kids. So you can find all these resources ready for you to use over in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. You can use the link below, or just look, honestly, go to Teachers Pay Teachers and type in Julia Teaching Resources. You will find me. If you'd like a free copy of the Elements of Music mind maps, remember they are basically these ones. They just don't have the information in them. Okay, they're the blank ones. Okay, but all the elements are in there, plus a few extra things, including the instrument classification ones and a couple of ones for dynamics. But go to juliajulia.com/free mind maps and you will be able to get yourself a free copy of those mind maps. And you can obviously find lots more information about timbre on my blog if you go to juliajulia.com. Okay, and there, if you go down the bottom of that first page, there's a thing that says Elements of Music. Click on that, and there it's basically like a little guide, and then you can just click through to wherever you need to go to. So I will just stop share now. And that is all about how to make an extended piece of writing or writing about the instrument classification and a lesson idea. So I said I've been doing this recently. The listening part, and analysing it and doing the writing part takes a good hour. So it takes about half an hour to do the whole listening part and writing that information out. And then it takes another half an hour at least to get through that paragraph when you're modelling it for your students. Okay, and it's a really good way to do things if you go, like, show them how to do it first, especially before you want them to actually write about it themselves. Okay.